Next this afternoon, for schools and colleges, Near and Far, which follows in just over 1 minute.
When it rains in a town, the rainwater runs off roofs and roads and eventually down the drain. On open ground, the rain first seeps in. When the soil can absorb no more water, it runs off downhill. This is how streams and rivers begin. Moving water can carry things with it. In this field, the water has washed a lot of the soil down the slope. You can probably imagine what the farmer thinks about that. The moving water and the silt it carries can carve whole networks of deep channels or rills. These rills can become very deep and narrow. This was carved in the same way, although it's not in a farmer's field. The Grand Canyon has been gouged out over millions of years by the rushing waters of the river Colorado. In places, the canyon is as much as 2 kilometers deep. The rock here is soft and can be easily worn away. Harder rock can be worn away, but it needs more than water and silt to do so. Upstream, a river's bed and banks may be covered with boulders. In the winter, when the river becomes a roaring torrent, these boulders get carried along by the river. Many of them have sharp edges. As they bounce along in the water, they help the river to cut down into the land, forming valleys like this one. At first, the river cuts a steep-sided bank, but in time the banks are attacked by frost and rain, and their slopes become much more gentle, leaving the valley shaped like a huge letter V. As the boulders tumble down the river, they're knocked around so much that many are reduced to smooth, round pebbles. If the river flows over a band of very hard rock, which it can't wear away, a waterfall is formed. One of the most spectacular sights in the world was formed like this. Niagara Falls attracts thousands of visitors every year. The water drops about 60 meters in a huge arch. Instead of a solid band of rock, a river may meet a group of hard rocks. Where this happens, rapids are formed, the water churning about among the rocks. Further down, where the slope is gentler, the river moves more slowly. Here it begins to wander from side to side, carving a wider valley. Where the river bends, the water moves more slowly on the inside than it does on the outside. On the outside of the bend, the faster moving water eats into the bank, causing the bank to cave in. On the inside, where the water moves more slowly, pebbles brought down by the river are deposited, forming new land. The wearing away on one bank and the building up on another causes the river to bend and wind in huge loops. These loops are called meanders. Sometimes the river takes a shortcut and bypasses the meander. When this happens, the part of the river that's cut off may dry up. In time, the wanderings of a river carve a wide, flat plain. This is known as the floodplain because sometimes after a lot of rain, the river may overflow its banks. When this bridge was built, it was specifically designed to let the floodwaters flow over the land. Flooding like this is a natural event in the life of a river. It can be quite a problem for farmers when their land is covered with water, but when the floodwater recedes, it leaves behind the silt it was carrying. This helps to improve the soil. In Switzerland, the farmers benefit enormously from the floodplain of the River Rhone. The river has been straightened and no longer floods, but the rich soil that it helped to form is still there. Rivers can benefit us, but they can also present problems. For instance, how to get across. The oldest and the simplest way is to cross where the river is shallow. At a ford. Today, the commonest method is to go over a river by bridge. Bridges for trains as well as cars. Sometimes we can go under a river, through a tunnel. But perhaps the most pleasant way to cross a river is by ferry. Of course, boats don't just travel across rivers. The cheapest way to carry goods is by boat, and most large rivers are very busy places. And if the cargo floats, why not let the river do the carrying? It's hard to imagine that this tiny boat can pull all these logs. Rivers can be used like giant highways. It's for that reason that these people in Thailand live in houses built on boats. There are few roads here, and the river is their main means of communication. Even in England, people live in houseboats. It's certainly very pleasant living on a river. The same can be said for these houses, with the river at the bottom of their garden. The river, in many cases, has given the houses their names. But what if your house is built on the floodplain? It's quite normal for a river to flood its banks every now and then. In 1968, the River Mole in Surrey, swollen by heavy rain, burst its banks, turning the streets of Molesey into rivers. The army and police were called out to rescue people trapped by the floodwaters and to deliver essential supplies. Thousands of homes were flooded, but fortunately no one was drowned. A flood like this may only happen once in 100 years, but naturally enough, the local residents don't want to risk it happening to them again. So a new river course is being built. A wide concrete channel is going to replace the gentle meandering river. The loops of the old river will eventually dry up. These houses are going to have a new river at the bottom of their garden. Faced with the choice of a safe concrete channel or a pretty river which may flood, which would you choose? In other countries, people may not have the choice. Bangladesh has many rivers which are vital for both trade and agriculture. Almost the whole country is on a floodplain, It provides rich soil for the farmers, but it also floods nearly every year. People carry on the best they can, although sometimes they may lose everything. And not just their houses. The swirling floodwaters may even wash away the soil. Rivers can have a dramatic effect on our lives, but we can also have an effect on rivers. Streams and rivers must be constantly cleared if the water is to flow. Weeds and silt can quickly choke a small stream like this if they're not removed, flooding the land. To prevent flooding and erosion, it may also be necessary to build artificial banks and walls along the river. Dams are sometimes built across the steep-sided valleys to create reservoirs. Here, the flow of the river has almost stopped, preventing valuable drinking water disappearing into the sea. On a smaller scale, weirs across rivers control the amount of water behind them, keeping rivers deep enough for boats. So that boats can get from the lower to the higher level, there needs also to be a lock. A lock has two sets of gates. Once inside the lock, the downstream gates are closed. Water is let in through the upstream gate, raising the level in the lock to the height of the water upstream. When the two levels are equal, the upstream gates can be opened. Going up a lock is just like going up a step. There are many ways in which we benefit from rivers. Perhaps you can find how a stream or a river near you is used or has changed the landscape.